Pod Candy,
a podcast about cults, crimes, and killers.
We watched Trust Me, The False Prophet on Netflix this week, and we need to talk about it.
Yes, we do, girl. This is a 4-part documentary about Samuel Bateman, a man who positioned himself as the next leader of the FLDS after Warren Jeffs was convicted and sent to prison.
And for people who don't know the FLDS, it's the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a polygamist Mormon breakaway group. Warren Jeffs was their leader until he was convicted of child sexual assault and sentenced to life in prison in 2011.
And Bateman saw that void and filled it. He proclaimed himself a prophet, told followers that Jeffs was now speaking through him, and began taking multiple wives, including girls as young as 9 years old.
What makes the documentary different is who is telling the story. Christine Marie is a cult psychology expert who moved to Short Creek, Utah with her husband, Tolga, a videographer. They didn't go there to make a documentary. They went to support the community.
And because they were embedded in that community, they captured things no outside film crew ever could have. They had relationships, they had trust, and that trust gave them access to what was really happening inside.
As they gathered evidence, they were begging local police to act. Meanwhile, Bateman was manipulating his followers, tightening his grip until eventually the FBI stepped in and raided the community.
He's in prison now for 50 years, but he's still making daily calls to his followers from his cell.
And many of those women and children are still not free, physically or mentally.
Gnomes Bisling, one of his adult wives who eventually left and spoke out in the documentary, said she still lives in the same town, still tries to reach people who are in it, but every time she approaches them, they're passive-aggressive toward her for speaking out.
She said something that stayed with me, that nobody understands how difficult it is to rewire your brain from the way you were raised.
That's the part that doesn't end when the cameras stop rolling.
That's what we're getting into today.
Please listen with care.
Outside my window, it's only raining. When the wind blows, I feel pain. I don't need no doctor, baby, I'm not sick. My body's been locked up, heartbroken ever since.
Oh,
Woo!
wow.
This was,
Yeah.
we mentioned this before we started recording, but this, I think we can all agree that it's one of the best documentaries I believe I've ever watched because of all this video footage that Christine Marie and her husband Tolga, because they were so entrusted with this sect of people, it was literally their lives on camera. And the way that this was produced and put together, it, like, Stacey, like, I couldn't stop watching. Like, I was like, for me, it took maybe like the first episode. And once the first episode was done, I'm like, I can't wait for number 2, number 3, number 4.
Me too. You know, it's great. It's interesting how Christine Marie and Tolga were able to almost manipulate Sam Bateman the same way he was manipulating the girls, in that they were manipulating him to believe that they were playing these characters. And I don't know if he seemed insane, but also not really charismatic at all. And I have one fun fact, because I've been listening to some podcasts
Wait, you've been listening? to
to some
other
podcast.
podcasts about this? Because we
No,
should be the foremost
no, you're right.
podcast
You're right.
on
But I
this
wanted,
topic.
you're right. I wanted more information on Christine Marie's background. And also, Gnomes was interviewed, and I am like crazy about her. Now, she was the one wife who was the 13th wife, right in the middle. And she said she's always in the middle. She's in the middle of all the kids in her family. She's in the middle of that. She was in the middle of everything, she said. And she was indoctrinated. She was fully, she drank the Kool-Aid. Her eye, you could see it in her eyes. Her eyes were almost bulging and staring at this guy in this ugly white leather coat, which he told, fun fact, he told all of his wives this was like a $32,000 jacket, something in that massive area. She said he got it on online for $16. So, that white leather jacket he's wearing all the time.
Oh,
with them,
that totally
like,
tracks. I mean,
that totally tracks. But not a charismatic guy. I mean, I don't know. Warren Jeffs, maybe he was really, really charismatic. I don't know. But
no,
Warren Jeffs,
we've heard Warren Jeffs too. Warren Jeffs was so mamsy-pamsy.
It's such a dud. And he's in prison and he's telling these women what to do. And he insists that nobody can have sex and have babies at all. He puts this like kibosh on all this stuff. Well, then Sam Bateman enters the picture. He's like, I'm going to take a bunch of wives and I'm going to change this.
It's been 5, 6, 7 years since some of these people have heard from Warren.
Now suddenly, Sam came up with that Warren Jeffs has actually died. And the media is lying to you as they always do, and it's just a mannequin that's in his room. And Sam said, I am now Warren Jeffs' messenger. He's giving me this direction from the other side of death.
This, in fact, was what Warren had said when his father died. His father had been the prophet, and Warren said that his father was now speaking through him. And so what Sam told his followers was that Warren had left his body and that he was now speaking through Samuel.
The other night we were talking and he said, this is the spirit of Uncle Warren. And I thought, that's pretty bold.
Yeah, for sure.
But if he didn't say it, he'd have never woke me up. And it never started down the path of waking me up.
He is now the mouthpiece for Warren Jeffs.
Sam decided that the mantle of Warren Jeffs had fallen upon him. I mean, shit. You take people's faith away, they'll do anything to feel it.
Moroni was the first person to believe in Sam. And because Sam was now the prophet, he agreed to turn over his daughters, even his very young daughters, to marry Sam. By the time we met Moroni, he had given all of his daughters to Sam.
So that's how that started, with Sam Bateman coming in there and manipulating not only these women's husbands, these men, but also all of these women. And I can't remember how many wives he had.
I think he had 20. I think he had at least 20. I read that he had, I don't need to listen to other podcasts.
No.
I can just do some reading.
No.
I'm joking.
I just wanted to hear about
kidding.
Gnomes. Because Gnomes is an artist. So this was one of the women in the group that we mentioned in the intro, one of the wives who was very indoctrinated and really was almost in his lap, staring at him when all the wives were surrounding him for whatever they were doing in that living room together, talking or praying or hearing him pontificate about something. The guy seemed completely like void to me, not smart, and just very easily manipulated himself. What are your thoughts, Dori?
Well, look at who prophets are. A lot of these people who lead cults are
false prophets.
But they're people who we would say, like, how do people follow this non-intelligent person? And Sam Bateman is no exception to that. What Sam Bateman was, he had the idea. Maybe there was I think honestly what Sam Bateman had is an ego. He's an egotistical guy who just thought, yeah, nobody is having babies. Nobody is with Warren Jeffs anymore. You know what? I'm going to go get a flock of dames, and I am going to start, I'm going to say I'm the prophet.
Not having church leadership just right there to counsel with, it was hard. So I would ask questions to Moroni.
Nothing worth anything in this life is easy.
Women are taught to submit to the men, and as the father, he was the ruling power over our family. And so when Moroni started following Sam, that made me make that change too. And so many of my sister wives and all of my daughters went to Sam. I did question the things we were doing, but I said, well, maybe there's something I'm not comprehending or understanding, and if I'll just hang on, I can better understand it. Because I felt like he wouldn't ask me to do something that would be harmful to myself or destructive to our family.
And he knew, I could tell just from from those.
He was aware.
He was aware he was no prophet, but he knew he could manipulate these. And you mentioned gnomes. And some of the other wives, that were young ladies. They weren't, he obviously also had children as his wives. But some of these young ladies, that the way that they got out, I mean, from the documentary, you can see, like Stacey said, like Gnomes is like staring adoringly at this guy that she didn't even like. She said later on, I wasn't even attracted to this person, but he manipulates the mind, right? And then as soon as they are separated, a lot of them went to prison. And as soon as they're all separated and they don't have that group mind thinking, which I'm sure that the doctor can talk about later, as soon as they're separated, they now start thinking for themselves, and they realize,
Noam said, and I can't remember if it was on this documentary or her full interview with her, where she said 99% of her brain was into the FLDS and that 1% was doubtful. She said that 1% of doubt is what saved my life. So, as we know, Sam Bateman used these women to work and give him the money, and he had expensive cars and he was driving around, and he always had a way of sort of explaining away why he had these things. And of course, the women didn't know what they were. They didn't know anything about style or anything like that. They didn't know the Gentile. They call others Gentiles. It doesn't necessarily mean Christians. It just means the other people. But as you said, Dori, when the cops came or when the FBI came and raided, he was kind of smug and sort of, it looked like he kind of knew, he knew that he was busted and that there was nothing he could do.
The jig is up.
The jig is up. And by the way, I heard somebody on a podcast say the gig is up. And I'm like, how do you not know that that's the jig is up? Okay. Anyway, because that's an expression.
Maybe, and also too, definitely not the gig is up. And also we forgot to say, and maybe when the doctor comes out, he would say it, but this definitely was a deuce.
This was a deuce?
This was definitely a deuce.
And it was heinous.
It was definitely heinous. But I think we also need to mention I believe, the full star of this whole thing who should get an award is Julia.
I know.
Julia, one of the wives who was married to Moroni, who was one of two other guys that Sam Bateman said, give us your daughters. So that's how this whole thing started. It was like these two dudes, convince their wives, their multiple wives, we're giving up our children.
Yep.
For
And
Sam
Julia
Bateman.
was.
And Julia was the one that started hanging out with Christine Marie on the sly. And Christine Marie said, I knew Julia wanted to talk. And let's give her props, because can you imagine?
I love her. I have the chills right now thinking of her. Just her strength.
Can you imagine being in that situation?
It's very difficult to explain to people how all of this happened. A slide of snow coming down the mountain, and it begins to roll like a snowball. Compromise by compromise, how does something so small as a snowflake build up till an avalanche was over our heads? I grew up knowing that you have a conscience. There's a certain fear that comes over you. The fear that you know you're doing wrong. The fear of God. One of the subtle things this wicked man did was to destroy conscience. That I was groveling in sin. I didn't want to live like this. I envied the corpse. I envied the corpse a lot. We weren't living very far from the police station. I could have simply walked over there. But I just kept thinking, will they hear one woman's cry? Once I knew that Christine was the one I could go to and ask for this help, I thought, okay, now we've got 2 women, not just one. Will they hear it?
Here's what's wrong. Having your young children in a room watching their fathers have sex, watching their dads. Can you imagine watching Sandy, making you watch him he has sex with multiple young girls?
I think I would literally vomit and implode and explode at the same time. That's the thing that's so gross about it. The girls are so this is what is crazy. So she's under this spell, Julia, because from the beginning of time, from the beginning of their life, this is all they know. How do you break through and find that 1% that John usually tells us? Healthy people, healthy brains have that tiny, tiny, tiny thing in the back of their mind that says, is this right? Is this wrong? And that doubt, can you imagine the fear she had? Because then she tells Christine they have these plans and they're delivering information, and she's also delivering information to the FBI, and they're not doing anything. Then the raid happens, and the FBI has no training on how to talk to people who have been coercively controlled and who have been brainwashed. And they're forcing these women into cars and scaring the shit out of them, which is there's no excuse for this. These women they were like Holocaust victims that didn't have any experience outside of it and didn't know what to do. And then they're putting it in jail, and they didn't know they were doing anything wrong. I mean, this is just awful.
They've also been taught to not trust
the police.
So
or anybody.
They're going to be like all freaked
out.
But also, like, I also think about Julia. Obviously, I commend her for everything.
Oh yeah.
I also think about like some of these, like, I guess, older women were around with Warren Jeffs. To me, my hope is, let me just say this, my hope is that they're not like, oh, I wish Warren Jeffs was still here. Like, oh, he was so great. Like, that was my worry watching this, because yes, Sam Bateman is absolutely disgusting, but I hope somebody like a Julia, which they didn't ever touch upon this, is like, oh, Warren Jeffs, I wish it was that way. Warren Jeffs had sex with children as well with these young daughters. Another thing too that I thought about is,
and Roland Jeffs.
Oh, right. And Roland, is that the father?
Rulin Jeffs, yeah.
Rulin Jeffs, the father?
Yeah, the father.
We also, and I know we've watched some of these before with the like older boys, but what this didn't touch upon either is obviously these women or young girls had children when they were all living in that house together, like 30 of them packed into that house to a two bedroom apartment or 2-bedroom house. Where are they didn't ever talk about like the young boys or like boys
where'd they go and what happened to them?
Boys growing up in this community and in this culture. What are the brothers, the uncles, the boy cousin, the male cousins say about all this shit that went on during that time with Sam Bateman or during the time of Warren Jeffs? Like,
right. We didn't hear about that.
The Kool-Aid. They obviously drink the Kool-Aid, as we know. But I wish that they maybe would have, and again, I love this documentary so much, but I wish maybe they would have interviewed more of the male figures. I know they interviewed Maroney and Maroney, who did have sex in front of his kids, but the one thing I will give Maroney credit for is he did sit down with his wife, Julia, one of his, million wives, Julia, who's the one who was the one who broke through all of this.
Yes.
And
thank God for her.
You know what? Yes, I sinned. I need to, and he's in prison now, but he listened to his wife where most men would not, right?
Right. Yeah. She's cognitively thinking and he's actually hearing it.
Moroni and we talked. And I talked to him like I'd never talked to him before in my life. I says, we're adults, we're parents, and we're following a false prophet. And he's leading us right to hell, and I'm not gonna go there anymore. I says, but you have to choose. He said, either we're damn right or we're damn wrong. I said, Moroni, we're damn wrong. And if you want to sit where that man's gonna sit, in prison for life, you can sit with him. You can choose. But I choose to get out of this hell, and I choose to get my children out of it. And he left that night, and he said he threw up all night long of the anguish. And I said, you will go through it as you realize what we've done as parents to our children. I'd never been so bold like that.
And that's what I'm talking about, this ability because some of these women are still in this cult because they're getting shit from jail. And I'm sure there's going to be some other, guy that comes in that claims to be the prophet again. And I just want to add, because I learned a little. There's
going to be many
uncharismatic, not attractive men with ugly white leather jackets. But Christine Marie, I heard more about her story, which was almost exactly the same when you hear about gnomes and how she felt, or not as much Julia, but more gnomes, because this guy that ended up manipulating Christine was not attractive, not any of these things. She said there were about 5 other guys that I was way more attracted to, but he kept looping me in and kept saying, oh, this happened. That's because I was trying to trick you into feeling this way. So now that you're feeling this way, I didn't want you to actually feel that. I wanted you to feel this. And she was all over the place. And then finally she succumbed to this thing with him. Finally she got out, but that is why gnomes really started becoming close with her. And because she saw that her story, Julia knew the story, but gnomes didn't know it necessarily. And once she learned it and saw something about Christine, now they're best friends. They have, it's wonderful. And gnomes is like, she's doing art and she's writing music and she loves acting. She's gorgeous.
Good for gnomes.
I had no idea I was going to be taken to prison. At first, I was really lost. My entire life, I was taught that obedience was everything. First law of heaven. And now here I am in prison for my perfect obedience. That was when I started to wonder about my beliefs. I'd been in jail for 4 or 5 months, and one day we were going to the courts for a status hearing about the situation with Sam, and they accidentally put me in a cell next to him, and he talked to me for 4 hours. He got all emotional and was all telling me, oh, I haven't got to talk to anybody for a whole year. He hadn't even been in there for an entire year. And that was the first time I actually recognized he's lying to me. After that, my whole mind shifted. Once I questioned one little thing, then a whole flood, like a tsunami of questions came in. What am I doing with my life? Why do I believe the way I believe? Is there even a God? And I realized I had been lied to my entire life. I was born in lies. And I couldn't even blame my parents for it. They were born in lies. When I looked back, I see that girl in third person. I thought I was in love with him. But now looking back, I understand it was complete fear.
And
Gnomes and Julia, great
I have
people.
to say, you know who doesn't wear an unattractive white leather jacket is Dr. John Mayer. And
Dr. John Mayer.
And I know that because I know he's chomping at the bit to talk about this, because
this is a big one.
There is so much to discuss. And I just want to say this too. I do feel sometimes we do jump all over the place because we have so much to say.
Yeah.
But this one in particular, I do feel like we could just talk and talk and talk and talk.
There's so many angles.
Let's bring in the doctor now, because maybe he'll get us a little bit more on track.
On track. That's the thing. The doctor comes, he smooths everything out. You know, it's like we're doing like an improvisational show, and he comes in, he's like, oh, let's set some of this.
I'm opening the green room door as you speak with my cup of coffee in hand and the remnants of my last punchki that I ate.
What's that?
Oh, you don't know what a punchki is?
Is that a donut?
Is it a Polish treat?
It's a traditional, Lenten donut that's eaten on the last, on the, what is that called? Fat Tuesday, where it's the last day we can eat sweets before Lent. And I thought
Lent already happened.
Oh, it is, but they had leftover punchkis, and so I had a big punchki.
A punchki or a
what is it sounds Yiddish. A punchki.
It's spelled really wacky because I think it's Polish, but
I said that earlier. It's got to be Polish. Punchki.
Yeah, but it's the most delicious thing in the entire world, and one of our listeners.
Isn't it just like a Bismarck? Isn't it just like a
No,
Danish?
It's just so unique. It's just very light donut dough or whatever you call that, and then it's got a massive amount of buttercream in the middle, and it's just can you see all the little white specks around my mouth?
I didn't want to bring that up, especially since we're talking about this topic today, Doctor.
It's not cocaine. It's all around my mouth.
That's interesting. That's not where I went.
Let me wipe this off.
I was thinking something very different.
Me too, Dori. I'm in your head.
Mind.
Ouch. Yeah, you're watching too many of these documentaries, which I absolutely agree with both of you that absolutely well done. I mean, from the start, when it started up and they had really nice music to introduce the documentary, I'm going, this is going to be different. And like both of you, a little secret. Usually I watched our documentary the night before we record, so it's fresh in my mind. I started this a couple days before because it's a 4-part series, and I couldn't put it down either. I
it
was
was
like,
intense.
this,
I was
I have
watching
to
it.
see what's next.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Incredibly well made, with all this real footage that Christine and Tolga, her husband, filmed, and then video cams from the police. Audience, really a well-made documentary. And then here's another reason why it's well-made, and this is one I encourage our audience to watch. Because of all the documentaries that we watched so far, didn't you think this really brought you so close to all these issues of the brainwashing and the group mindset of these people? I really felt
the group mind.
It was so close. It was like you were inside, with them. And
yes, it was. I felt trapped while I was watching it.
Yeah, and I think
it covered everything. Like Christine, even in the car rides, Christine Marie would always have something filming. That's why this documentary was. It was like we were there for all of it. It didn't seem like there were any loose ends, like within the story, right?
Right.
Well, except you brought up, and I'll get to this later. I don't want to talk about it now.
Except for the male.
The boys, the whole issue of the males. And of course, what we're going to add today, background and some deeper analysis of what's happening with these people. But back to the actual documentary, I really want to make this point for the audience that watch this, because I would think a lot of people look at groups like this and go, what's wrong with these people? Why are they doing this? If you watch this particular documentary, you really get a sense of, oh, I see how this can happen. I see how people can be so brainwashed and so integrated in this from being born into the whole cults here we have. So I think it's very well worth watching for that whole sense of, if you ever think, oh, how can people follow these people? This really gives you a great perspective as to this is why it happens. Now, let me launch into something I'm dying to talk about. This Samuel Bateman, didn't you both get a little sense that there was something cognitively wrong with this guy?
Yes.
He even
I also
has
got that sense from Warren Jeffs.
Oh, yes.
I'm just saying, like, all of these quote unquote prophets, that is why I don't get how so many follow uncharismatic.
No offense, it's like the Walmart.
People.
It's like the Walmart version of prophets.
Well, let me get into that. First of all, the key element is they're born into this. People are born into this. They have no sense of anything different. And another thing that probably could have been brought out in the documentary is, don't forget, they're restricted from knowing anything different. They didn't know, they're not familiar with police or law enforcement. They're not educated. They're educated incestuously, by the FDLS or whatever it's called. I can't even. FLDS, whatever. They are so controlled and isolated that that's where the brainwashing takes place. So even a person like the Warren Jeffs and Samuel Bateman can be adored by these people, and they're really adored. I mean, some of the scenes, and again, I wonder if you both agree. I watch a fair number of horror stories because that's some of the screenplays I write, and they look like a vampire with their vampire women all over him. At one point, in fact, not one point, many times he's sitting there on this sofa or something, and all his wives and all these women are like huddled around him, almost cuddling. And it, to me, it was reminding him of these classic vampire stories with the vampire, with all the victims around him. And they were victims. All these people were victims. But I want to get back to this Samuel Bateman and this cognitive deficit. Warren Jeffs, as homely and unappealing as he was, he looked, like pretty much a normal guy. This Sam Bateman, to me, as a doctor in this field, he looked a little bit like he had Down syndrome.
Oh, I didn't think that. He
had
Really?
some of the facial characteristics of what we see in Down syndrome. This is a pretty cool fact for everybody. The scientific name for Down syndrome, and I might be pronouncing this wrong, is called trisomy 21. And what it means is that, and what happens in Down syndrome, is you have 3 copies of the 21 chromosome, number 21 chromosome. And I was just thinking as I was watching this, he might not have all 3 copies, but he's got 2 copies of chromosome 21.
But they're all having sex with one another. I mean, it really, like you had mentioned, incestuous about just think they're all having, like, literally, they're all having sex with their children, with their uncles, with their aunts, with their cousins. Like, they're all, so that very well, like you mentioned, the 23 like he obviously, yes, a lot of these, I just don't get how somebody just says, I'm a prophet. Like, can Dori Goldman go to Arizona right now and live among these people and say, hey, everybody, I'm Dori Goldman. I'm the new prophet.
Well, let me point. Yeah, well, no, you can't, and I'll tell you why.
Because I'm a woman. That's
I follow you, Dori.
Thank you.
I follow you.
And the men are the leaders in this crazy, evil group that we have here.
Cult.
But cult.
Oh, yeah. They're calling it a cult.
Let me point out 2 facts to highlight something. Samuel Bateman. Oh, and by the way, sorry for this tangent, but do you remember in the documentary they talked about before he proclaimed himself a prophet, he was considered a loser and an outcast by the group. But here's what he did, which was so important. He offered them something they wanted. You both pointed out that Warren Jeffs proclaimed from prison to his flock here, this cult, no more sex, no more having children. So what did Bateman do? Bateman gave them a treat. He gave them a reward by saying, yeah, I'm the new prophet, and here, those rules don't exist anymore.
Sex for all.
Sex for all for one, etc. The 1,000 musketeers here. That opened the door to having sex, having children. And if you remember, the women went, oh yeah, we can have, I was so wanting to have a baby. This 17-year-old child, Moretta claimed, I was so wanted to have a child, because this is what they're brainwashed into at the early stages of the Warren Jeff cult. And Bateman said, yeah, let's have sex and babies again. And in particular, he manipulated this Moroni because there was something that Moroni did that was against the cult, and he felt shamed and guilty for it. And Sam Bateman, like a priest, came in and said, I absolve you of this. You're fine. Come back into the cult.
About 8 months before Sam named himself the prophet, Moroni started doing his own thinking. At the time, no one was supposed to be getting married, having babies, but Moroni started taking new wives and having children without the blessings of Warren Jeffs. He was shunned by the town. He didn't know, would he ever be FLDS again? I mean, that was his culture, his lifelong investment. He felt like he had really sinned against God. Moroni He thinks, I'm going to hell. Life is over. But Sam, who now represents himself as speaking for Warren Jeffs, starts embracing Moroni. He's offering a path to salvation, basically. Sam was putting him and his family up on a pedestal.
Moroni's like, I have a second chance. At that point, Sam becomes God to Moroni.
Sam had no reservations now about commanding that people obey him.
Moroni would take his money, give everything to Sam. And then Sam wanted more and more and more, like Moroni's wives and daughters.
Moroni he was just hook, line, and sinker after that. His guilt was gone, etc. So the issue, Dori, you couldn't be a prophet. One, you're a woman. Two, you weren't born into this thing. And what are you offering everybody? What's the treat you're giving?
She's offering them oil and
oil. I can't offer oil.
Frankincense and myrrh?
I don't know. I made that up.
One of the biggest things about this cult is reproduction, right? Is really truly having sex. And let me just say too, those young dames, they had mouths on themselves like nobody's business. They are F that, F that, F that, F that.
When the police arrive.
Right. But that's also interesting because that's how they're spoken with about sex. They're freaky deeks, right? But my question is, they're young girls that want babies so badly because that's ingrained in their culture, right? Why do they all want to give them up as soon as they can once they have them? Why is it that these mothers are so willing I get it, it's for the prophet to go to heaven, but how can you at 6, 7 years old, their daughters, and be like, you're right, you know what? Some quote unquote prophet should marry my daughter. How does that happen, doctor?
I want to pop in real quick before I lose the answer here, which is that this all happens because children and of course women are objects. They're treated as objects. They're not treated with respect. They're not treated as whole human beings. So you can just give up your object, your little object here, because the prophet, in this case, Samuel Bateman, says, yeah, you're giving it to me so I can have sex because that'll get you into heaven. So they become like a currency. Women and children become a currency to get to heaven.
But somebody like Julia, who loved her daughter, who loved her children, you can see it. A lot of these women, I think, really do love their kids. I don't get, and Julia didn't think this was right. I don't get how and I do get it because that is it's all about getting into heaven. It's all about living that, that is what their motivator is, being of God, being that is what it is. I just don't get how this cult still exists in this day with all these arrests and everything like that it is still, this is the way we do things where children are automatically as soon as you can, you're going to marry somebody, you're going to have a baby, that anybody, even I get it, it's a cult, they're brainwashed, but how you live like that?
Because they don't know. Dori, you're missing the point that they don't know anything else. They don't know anything else. One of the things I learned from this documentary was the edict in this cult that we're supposed to have, and I mean the whole cult, even the Warren Jeffs and I forget who was even before Warren Jeffs.
All the FLDS, all within this.
They say you need to have a baby once a year. If you remember that, it was pointed out every year you should be having a baby.
Yeah.
Until you can't conceive anymore.
As I always say, my vagina's hurting just hearing that.
Yeah, it's incredible.
You know, I have a question for you. What was his fascination with the Queen of England coming to visit them and live with them?
At times, the things Christine had to do truly became ridiculous.
I have some new pieces of information.
Okay.
Remember how I told you that he thinks that the Queen of England belongs to him?
Right.
Well, he's been having impressions that he needs to do a music video.
It's not for self-aggrandizement. It is for the sole purpose to get the Queen to come over here, because that's the next step in my mission. I don't know why. I don't care why, but that's the next thing that needs to happen.
And he wants to put it on YouTube, and so somehow it will get to the Queen, and the Queen will come here and become his wife.
That's why I see him being mentally ill. I mean, delusional, weird thoughts. I mean, come on. Like, where is that coming from? How is that realistic?
Stacey, that's why I go back to this Down syndrome, is because, obviously, in my work, I've helped any number of young people with Down syndrome, and they can create these like delusions that the Queen of England is the most important person in the world, and so I need to, if I want to be, remember that Sam Bateman said, I would like to be the most important prophet in the whole world and bring the whole world into peace and love.
Right.
Well, the Queen of England was his currency in that. There's a lot of issues about currency with this group. Like I said, children and women are currency to get to heaven. I think the Queen of England was this delusional, psychotic idea that would help me that would legitimize me so I can get my message to the entire world.
And it's also money equals power too. Like like Stacey had mentioned too, that all the women are working to give money. But that is a lot, not just that women are, but that is a lot about religion, that you really, it's a lot, we've talked about this. It's a lot about money. They don't pay, if you're in these religion, you don't pay taxes. I mean, you are able to kind of, and I'm kind of trying to tie it into the Queen of England thing. Like, you do think that you are above the law. You feel like you are special and you are God anointed, and you're making all this money and you're putting these women in shitty small places because one day and Warren Jeffs did that too, where he was like, yeah, like, let's move them all into this one little house, all these people, and they're suffering and barely eating. It's unbelievable to me that and this is what taking place in Arizona, right? This is where they were all, where this group is. I just don't get it. How we all allow this to happen in this day and age.
Can I say something that really aggravated me watching this documentary, and it did in our Warren Jeffs episode. I'm all for our Constitution and freedom of religion and things like that, but my God, we need some kind of national definition of what a religion is, because we've seen this so many times, with our documentaries, is that how can you call this a religion? We need something to define what a true religion is. It's above my pay grade, but
it needs to be more than just in these little cults, which aren't little. It's the whole world. Is that the evangelical Christianity is not it's not religious.
Well,
it's anti-Christian.
You get to make up your own rules. Like, I could
interpret the Bible however the fuck you want.
I could start a religion right now, and my religion is, every person has to eat sushi on Fridays. Like, that is my rule. You all have to eat sushi on Fridays, and you all can only go to the grocery store on Tuesdays. And that's going to be my, like, but you know, like how insane that sounds, but it's literally like, who the F are you to say you should have a baby every year?
Right.
You know, like, who are you to keep women?
I was going to say, it's not
about
that
obedience.
any more insane than what we've seen in this cult.
Yeah.
And now 2, if not 3, of our episodes here.
All
there's
of these
crazy
fundamentalist
rules.
Christian group that call themselves Christians, all the fundamentalist Christian groups are that they do not subscribe to any teachings of Jesus's. They make it up. The child assault, child abuse, all these things are not, they can't be constituted into a religion. And I don't understand why they hide. Well, they weaponize the religion, they hide behind it to excuse it, and all they need is a forgiveness from God, which is fake anyway. And so they're like, oh, I mean, I'm not saying God is fake, but like, come on, you cannot explain away abuse by saying your God has forgiven you, and that's all you need. You don't need the authorities. You just need that forgiveness between you and God.
And can I add, because both of you said this so quickly and so needs to be underlined, a different layer that this Samuel Bateman put on this whole sex, horrible sex evilness that went on.
Mm-hmm.
He had the little children watching him have sex with his wives to teach them what they needed to know to be a woman, and teach them. The only sex education they got was watching him have sex with his wives, and by the way, and little children. He also had sex with the little children in these
and their dad
orgy episodes.
And Baroni, like watching the dad, like, hey, my little daughter, your granddaughter, oh, watch me have sex. Like,
so wrong.
It is unconscionable, I think, to all of, I mean, and I'm sure everybody who listens, I get it. It's a cult. I get that you're born into this. I get that you only know this. And like Stacey touched on this too, gnomes, and Moretta. I know Moretta's out too and feels the same way. Like you are, when you're in it and you all have that group mind, you are in it. I get it. And the way they showed it so perfectly in the documentary, the looking of just admiration, of full love, like, and as soon as they went to prison, as I mentioned before, as soon as they were separated from all the other women, they started thinking, is this correct? Should
I bet you, and this is what the documentary didn't say, they didn't talk about the transformation that Gnomes and Moretta went through in prison. But I feel, and this I think may be one of the learnings of our episode today, they got educated. They saw they saw the world. They were allowed to see the world, and voila, these things are wrong.
That's actually a fact, because Gnomes said in prison she talked to was her name Marietta, the daughter, Julia's daughter? How do you pronounce her name? So she talked to
Moretta or something.
Moretta. Yeah. She was in a cell next to her. And they shared stories, and Gnome said she learned so much, positive stuff about herself and about her thoughts.
Right.
She said it's amazing once you're sitting there without all that other shit, noise and stuff, then you're like, oh.
Yeah.
But when you're surrounded by it, how are you supposed to understand anything other than
education? Education is the key. Audience, be educated. Learn about the world, learn about our history, learn about sociology, learn about psychology.
I didn't mention this before, and I don't know if the two of you had the same reaction I did, but because they kept saying that Gnomes was the fighter, like Gnomes would never go against anything. When she showed up to be interviewed on the documentary, I got tears in my eyes. And honestly, if I were with other people, I'd be applauding. Like Stacey is
I
right.
was
Like,
so
did you
proud of
too?
her.
I was shocked
my
that
God.
she
I
showed
was like,
up on the
yes!
documentary to talk about it. It made
Amazing.
me so happy.
I agree
Well,
with you. I felt the
and
same way.
I felt the same way about Julia. Maybe even to me more powerfully with Julia,
She was so
her
afraid.
Noam's mother. And you know the other thing that I thought the documentary really did well, if you watch it a second time, this is really great movie making because I do write screenplays. If you look at Julia in a lot of the scenes, she's sitting there with kind of a little bit of a quizzical look, even when she was fully invested in the whole cult. She's sitting there kind of like, Julia, to me, was the ultimate hero here. She was the first one to speak up, and
she was the 110%. They would have never gotten Bateman and gotten the other dude sentenced if it was not for her.
Sam sensed that Julie was not going with the program.
He knew. I just wasn't believing all that. When you say, I fear what's happening, something's wrong and I don't feel good about it, and you would say, fear and faith cannot remain in the same person at the same time, then you need to go and, humble yourself because you're giving way to fears. And he's been very concerned, to the point he's turned those girls away from me and has them entirely convinced. The word he calls me over and over in their minds day after day, which was a word we never ever even used or brought into our vocabulary, was a bitch.
He made her stand in front of the group and confess that she was a bitch. She had to take on this identity and say terrible things about herself and how bad she was. Sam was constantly coming up with stories to make all her daughters believe things about her that were not true.
My children hate me.
She literally saved lives. And here is somebody who has never, just like the others, it's not like she was a Gentile and out in the world. She wasn't. She was in this. But in her mind, she knew right from wrong. And she was very intelligent too, because they talked about a lot of, like, she had that instinct of, oh yeah, I am going to record this. I am going to take this down. Like, she knew without being told. And again, major props to her, because and major props to Christine Marie and
scary.
Tolga.
Can I talk about that, Christine Marie? Because when the documentary started, I really didn't want to like her because they showed her in her early career, I guess you'd say it, and she was a ventriloquist, a beauty queen, which I have problems with this whole beauty pageant stuff in general.
He doesn't like this thing.
Yeah, and I just go on, oh, this is, what kind of a person is this? And I think she was a puppeteer and all these kinds of things.
She had a lot of, and she had a TV show, very, very low budget.
And then the topper for me was she gets a degree from like a third-rate school. It seems like almost like a mail order school. And then calls herself an expert on cults. I almost cringed when both of you said, oh, Christine Marie, expert on cults.
But if you listen to her, but here,
well, that's what I'm getting at, Dori. Let me finish. That's what I'm getting at. But she just maybe is equal to, if not more so than Julia. She's an absolute hero in this whole thing. I came to admire her so much. Her and Tolga, her husband, basically devoted their lives to exposing this, which I can't praise that enough. That's what gave me goosebumps and tears in my.
Do you both? I don't have what they have. I don't have what Christine Marie and what Julia have, that instinct of people. I'm a recruiter and I interview people, so I know what good looks like in the corporate world, but I really don't have, like, for Christine Marie to instinctually be like, we need to help these people, we need to record them constantly and gain their trust. I wouldn't be able to do that. That's why I'd be terrible on like a Survivor or a Big Brother or anything like that. I don't have what these people have, and that's why they're heroes to me.
Can I say something again, an important, I think, message for our audience? One of the ways that I'm coping with all the garbage that's going on in our world right now and in our country is people like Christine. There's people in this country that are so noble and so passionate about what's right and wrong that they can literally give up their lives. I don't know how many years she was involved. I think it was the number of 3, 4, 5 years her and Tolga did all this video. Isn't that say something about our country and the people that make up our world? Is that there are people out there like Christine and Julia. Audience, don't give up hope with our country and the world and what's going on. The people will rise up like Christine and
you do.
Tolga.
You have to have, like what Dori's saying, just trying to think this through. You have to, first of all, she had the experience herself, so she was able to talk the talk, which was helpful. Would I have entered into a situation like that? Probably not. And I'm kind of on Dori's page I'm not the person who goes in there, but you really got to have a plan, because if you don't go there with a plan, and I don't think that they didn't have a plan to do a documentary. And when they started doing it, that it started rolling because, this guy was so easily manipulated, Sam Bateman, when they told him, oh, we just want to see like how you became, they just sweet talked him into just sort of blindly following them. But then there were points that got really scary where they were nervous that they were being found out. And, these people, they infiltrate everything. So, he was probably on the inside, and who knows? But, that's a scary thing. So the people that are willing to do that, like the people that are willing to go fight, and that are, the people that are willing to help people in this capacity, it's incredible. I'm willing to give money to those people. I don't know if I'd be the person going into the place. Do you know what I mean?
I totally agree.
I'll support it, because I don't have that's not how I operate. Like, I can't think, I would only just want to come in and help.
Like that. I just don't either. Like that. I don't. Yeah. I don't. I have extreme compassion for people and extreme empathy, but I would never be like, yes, I'm going to do this for 3 years and record.
Yeah. Isn't it? It's so noble. Trust. It's so noble. But again,
so noble.
It gives me such hope for the future of our country and our world, that this is what we're made. This is truly what we're made of, as people like Christine. And I can't say that enough.
Christine was helping your neighbor. She was Christ.
Right. I also want to, as long as I'm using the word cope, I think another important thing for our audience to think about, a lesson from us today to you, audience, is Naomi, and her transformation. And she said a really interesting line at one point, and I wrote it down, so I'm going to look at my notes. I look upon me during this time when I was so ingrained in this cult that it wasn't me. It wasn't me. I'm now an entirely different person. And here's the importance of that. When I help people who have had horrible, abusive, sick backgrounds of sexual torture and physical abuse, that's one of the things that I bring them to, is to look upon that period in your life as that's not you anymore. You're an entirely different person. That person doesn't exist anymore. This is who you are. And we call it dissociation. You dissociate yourself from that. And Noam did a great job of dissociating herself from who she was.
It's
and
okay to
so traumatic.
dissociate. That's not denial. It's different than
No,
denial, right?
It is. It's very different. It's very different than denial.
Okay. Well,
But
you've taught me some of this stuff. Yes. You taught me some of this stuff about, just when you have to move forward, sort of putting a chapter behind you, not,
Yeah.
addressing the situation, but then being able to put it behind you so you're not living in that constant trauma all the time.
Exactly. And another important point about that is not to feel the guilt of you made a mistake. We all do. We all do.
Yeah. It's
make
hard not to beat
mistakes.
yourself up for that stuff,
Exactly. But you got to look at it as that I was a different person then. So that's where these mistakes came.
It's a really good point. I was a different person then. This was a great documentary.
A lot of lessons in this
FLDS
documentary.
is a fascinating topic, and I'm really glad we did it. And we'll see you guys next time we do another fascinating 50 minutes of material.
And you can always buy us, and particularly me, a great cup of coffee and a punchki or a donut, before I go on. So
check out our merch on our website as well.
Oh yeah, we got to talk about those. We now have fully merchandise on our website, and we're now in 55 different countries. Our podcast. And thank you,
wonderful,
everybody on our podcast. And the most current country to join us is New Zealand. So we welcome all our fans in New Zealand. So
thank you, everybody.
Please stay tuned for our next episode, The Gilgo Beach Killer, House of Secrets on Peacock.
Pod Candy!